Are you prepared for what's coming in the next 10 days? Because right now, over the eastern United States, a weather pattern is about to flip that hasn't happened this dramatically in over 3 years. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly when this shift hits your area, what temperatures you can expect, and the critical window starting January 9th that changes everything. Stay with me, because at the 3-minute mark, I'll reveal the exact date when your region transitions, and you won't want to miss what I'm showing you at minute 5. It could impact your entire month. Right now, as Providence would have it, the Northeast is experiencing one of the coldest early January periods in recent memory. We're talking temperatures running 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit below average. Lake Ontario is producing snow bands so intense that some areas have already received over 2 feet of snow in just 48 hours. But here's what most forecasters aren't telling you: this cold isn't going to last. Think about this question: what happens when a massive high-pressure ridge spanning over 2,000 miles begins pushing northward from the Gulf of Mexico? Your gut might tell you warmer weather. You'd be right. But the scale of this warmth is what should grab your attention. By Monday, January 6th, the entire eastern half of the country begins a temperature climb that meteorologists are calling significant. We're not talking about a slight warming trend. Computer models are showing temperatures in the southeast reaching the low 80s Fahrenheit by midweek in early January. Let that sink in. Here's your first critical piece of information. And I want you to remember this. The atmosphere above us operates in layers, and right now, at the 500 millibar level, which is about 18,000 feet up, that's roughly 3.5 miles above your head, we're watching a trough of low pressure sitting over Atlantic Canada. This trough has been funneling Arctic air southward like a conveyor belt. Cold air doesn't just show up randomly. There's always a mechanism, and this trough has been that mechanism for the past week. But by his design, nature seeks balance, and that balance is coming in the form of a building ridge. Now, I promised you something important at the 30-second mark. Here it is, between January 7th and January 15th. The pattern shift I'm describing will bring above-average temperatures to over 200 million Americans. That's roughly 60% of the entire U.S. population. This isn't speculation. 5 different computer models, the European model, the GFS, the Canadian model, all showing the same signal. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where you need to pay close attention. Alaska has been abnormally cold this entire fall and winter. We're talking about a persistent trough that's kept temperatures there 20 to 30 degrees below normal for weeks on end. This is significant because when Alaska stays that cold for that long, it changes what we call the EPO, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. A negative EPO, which means cold in Alaska, typically supports winter weather patterns for the lower 48 states. It's like a domino effect through the atmosphere. What's about to happen, though, is that Alaska's cold pattern begins to break down around January 10th. The ridge that's currently warming the eastern U.S. will eventually push all the way up into Alaska. This shifts us toward a positive EPO. For winter weather enthusiasts, that's typically bad news. But wait, there's a twist coming that changes this entire equation. Are you wondering why I'm giving you all this technical detail? Because understanding the why helps you prepare for the what. And the what is coming in just a moment. Let me paint you a picture of what early next week looks like. Monday morning, January 6th. You wake up. If you're in Atlanta, Georgia, you might see temperatures in the upper 40s. By afternoon, near 60 degrees. If you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, low 50s, Raleigh, Durham, mid 50s, even up in Washington, D.C., we're talking upper 40s to low 50s Fahrenheit. Now, that might sound pleasant after the holiday cold snap, but here's the conflict. This warmth comes with moisture, lots of it. A storm system moving across the southern states between January 3rd and January 5th is going to bring beneficial rainfall. We're talking 1 to 1.5 inches of rain from Birmingham to Atlanta to Columbia, South Carolina. After the drought conditions many areas faced, this rain is answered prayer. But moisture plus warmth plus instability equals something else. On January 4th, there's a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms across southern Georgia and northern Florida. We're not talking about a major outbreak, but there's a 2% tornado risk in early January. That should tell you how unusual this warm pattern is. Keep watching, because in 60 seconds, I'm going to show you what happens after this warm spell, and it's not what you might expect. The Northeast, meanwhile, continues to get hammered by lake effect snow. Right now, there's a snow band pivoting off Lake Ontario that's been stationary for over 36 hours. Some towns in upstate New York, places like Fulton and Pulaski, could see an additional 2 feet of snow by Saturday morning. That's on top of what they've already received. We're talking about 4 to 5 feet of total accumulation in some localized areas. The snow-to-liquid ratio in these bands is running about 15 to 1, which means light, fluffy snow that piles up fast. But here's what you need to understand. This lake effect machine only works when you have cold air over warm lake water. Lake Ontario's water temperature right now is around 38 degrees Fahrenheit. The air moving over it is in the teens. That temperature difference of over 20 degrees creates the instability needed for these intense snow bands. But as the warm ridge builds in, this lake effect shuts down. By January 8th or 9th, it's essentially over for this event. So we have two different Americas right now. The Northeast, buried in snow and cold. The South and West, dealing with rain and warmth. But both are about to change. Now, here's the 5-minute mark. And I promised you something important here. So pay attention. Between January 10th and January 16th, there's a signal developing in the extended forecast models that could bring the pattern change many of you have been waiting for. Here's what we're seeing. That ridge I told you about, the one bringing warmth to the eastern US, it doesn't last forever. Around January 10th, we start to see a dip in the jet stream over the eastern Pacific. This is called a trough. And when it digs southward along the west coast, it sets up a chain reaction. Think of the atmosphere like a wave. When you push down in one spot, it rises in another. That trough over the west coast forces the ridge currently over the east to shift. And when ridges shift, they often break down entirely. What replaces them? You guessed it, another trough. The European ensemble model, which is one of the most reliable long-range models we have, is showing lower heights. That means colder air dropping into the central and eastern US starting around January 12th. The GFS ensemble, America's model, shows something similar but delayed by a day or two. Even the Canadian model, which often marches to its own drummer, is hinting at this pattern. Now, I want to be straight with you. We're talking about events 10 to 12 days out. At this range, we're looking at patterns, not specific storms, but the pattern signal is becoming stronger with each model run. And when multiple models agree on a pattern change, especially this close to the event, it's worth taking seriously. Here's a question for you. What happens when a trough digs into the eastern US in mid-January? You get cold air, yes, but you also get storm potential. And depending on where that trough sets up, depending on moisture availability, depending on a dozen other factors, you could be talking about winter weather for a huge swath of the country. This is where faith and preparation intersect. We can't control the weather. That's in God's hands, but we can prepare. We can watch. We can be ready. Let me give you some specifics about what this pattern change might look like, and I'm going to give you this step by step, so stay with me. Step 1. By January 8th, the ridge peaks. This is when we see the warmest temperatures. Some areas of Texas and Louisiana could touch 80 degrees. Even the Ohio Valley might see 60s. Step 2. January 9th through 10th, a small dip in the pattern. This is where it gets interesting. Some models are showing a quick moving system that could bring a brief shot of cooler air and maybe some precipitation to the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. It's not a major event, but it could be a preview of what's coming. Step 3. January 11th through 13th, the real pattern flip begins. The ridge breaks down. Cooler air starts filtering in from the north. Temperatures drop back toward or even below normal across the east. Step 4. January 14th through 16th. This is the window where storm potential increases dramatically. If we can get a system to develop in the southern plains or Gulf Coast and track northeast during this time frame, we could be talking about a significant winter weather event for the southeast, mid-Atlantic, or northeast. But here's the catch, and this is important. We need several things to line up perfectly. We need the timing to be right. We need moisture available. We need the cold air to be in the right place. Right now, we're maybe 60% confident on the pattern change. We're maybe 30% confident on a specific storm. Those odds will improve or worsen as we get closer. The technical term for what we're watching is called the PNA, the Pacific North American Pattern. When we have ridging over the western U.S., that's a positive PNA, and a positive PNA often supports troughing and colder weather in the east. Right now, we're moving from a negative PNA to a neutral PNA to potentially a positive PNA by mid-month. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual transition, but when it completes, it changes everything. Think about Joseph in Egypt, storing grain during the 7 years of plenty before the 7 years of famine. Was he being paranoid? No. He was reading the signs and preparing. We're not talking about famine here, obviously. But the principle applies. When you see patterns shifting in the atmosphere, when multiple signals point the same direction, wisdom says pay attention. Here's another piece of the puzzle, the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation. This measures blocking patterns over Greenland. A negative NAO means high pressure over Greenland, which blocks the jet stream and forces it southward over North America. That's good for cold and winter weather. Right now, the NAO is neutral to slightly positive, which means no blocking. But some long-range forecasts suggest we might see blocking develop in the second half of January. If that happens alongside the pattern change I've been describing, it could lock in cold weather for an extended period. The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, is another factor. This is a tropical pulse of enhanced thunderstorm activity that moves eastward around the globe every 30 to 60 days. When the MJO is in certain phases, it can influence weather patterns thousands of miles away. Right now, the MJO is weak and sitting in what forecasters call the circle of death. That's not a technical term, by the way, but it's what we call it when the MJO basically stalls out and loses its amplitude. When the MJO is weak like this, its influence on mid-latitude weather patterns is minimal. So we can essentially ignore it for now and focus on those teleconnections I mentioned earlier, the EPO, the PNA, the NAO. Let me bring this back to something practical. What should you do with this information? First, check your 10-day forecast regularly over the next week. You're going to see a warming trend through January 7th or 8th, then watch for what happens after that. If you start seeing forecast temperatures dropping significantly around January 10th or 11th, that's your first confirmation that the pattern change is beginning. Second, if you live anywhere from the Rockies to the East Coast, keep an eye on forecasts around January 13th through 16th. That's the window where we have the highest potential for something interesting to develop. Third, remember that long-range forecasting is about probabilities, not certainties. I'm giving you the most likely scenario based on current data. But the atmosphere is complex, and things can change. Trust in God's sovereignty, but use the wisdom He's given us through modern meteorology. Now, here's something that might surprise you. While I've been talking about cold and potential winter weather, the western United States is dealing with its own situation. A significant storm system is approaching the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. This system will bring heavy rain to the coast, potentially 3 to 5 inches in some areas, and heavy mountain snow above 4,000 feet elevation. We're talking 1 to 2 feet of snow in the Cascades and Sierra Nevada by Saturday. This is beneficial for drought-stricken California, where reservoirs have been running below normal for months. Sometimes God's provision comes through storms. There's a winter weather event happening right now across Nebraska that deserves mention. A small system is producing a wintry mix, mainly freezing rain, across eastern Nebraska into western Iowa. We're talking about 1/10 to 2/10 of an inch of ice accumulation. That might not sound like much, but even 1/10 of an inch of ice can make roads treacherous and bring down tree limbs. If you're traveling through this area this evening, Exercise extreme caution. Back to the bigger picture. The temperature gradient across the country right now is remarkable. You have 80s in South Texas and Louisiana, 60s across the Gulf Coast. But drive north into the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes, and you're in the 30s and 40s. Keep going to upstate New York, and you're in the teens and 20s with feet of snow on the ground. This gradient, this clash between different air masses is what creates weather. When warm and cold collide, things happen. Storms form. Winds increase. Precipitation develops. As we move toward mid-month, watch for this gradient to shift. The warm air will retreat southward. The cold air will advance. And somewhere in between, in that transition zone, that's where the action happens. Here's a thought to consider. Why do we care so much about weather? Beyond the practical reasons of planning our days and staying safe, there's something deeper. Weather reminds us of forces beyond our control. It humbles us. A single winter storm can shut down entire cities. A heat wave can stress power grids. We build sophisticated technology, we forecast with supercomputers, but ultimately, we're still at the mercy of the atmosphere. There's a verse that comes to mind. He gives snow like wool and scatters frost like ashes. He hurls down his hail like pebbles. Who can withstand his cold? The psalmist understood something we sometimes forget in our modern age. Weather is not random. It's part of a designed system. Chaotic at times, yes. Difficult to predict beyond a certain point, absolutely. But there's order underlying it all. Let me give you one more technical detail that ties everything together. The jet stream, that river of fast-moving air about 30,000 feet up, is what drives our weather patterns. When the jet stream is flat, running mostly west to east, we get quiet weather. When it becomes amplified, developing deep troughs and tall ridges, we get active weather. Right now, we're in a transition period. The jet stream is beginning to amplify. That amplification is creating the pattern change I've been describing. By January 15th, the jet stream pattern could look dramatically different than it does today. Instead of a ridge over the east, we might have a trough. Instead of a trough over the west, we might have a ridge. It's like the atmosphere is flipping a switch. Will this pattern change bring significant winter weather to the east? That's the million-dollar question. The honest answer is, we don't know yet. The potential is there. The pattern supports it. But weather forecasting, especially at this range, is about possibilities, not guarantees. What we can say with high confidence is that the warmth coming next week is temporary. What we can say is that a pattern change is likely around January 10th through 12th. What we can say is that the second half of January has higher winter weather potential than the first half. As we close out these 15 minutes, I want to leave you with this. Stay informed, stay prepared, and stay hopeful. Weather patterns are always changing. What looks quiet today might be active next week. What looks active today might be quiet next month. This is the nature of meteorology and the nature of seasons. In the coming days, watch for updates. Model guidance will continue to evolve. Forecast confidence will increase as we get closer to these events. And when we get within 5 to 7 days of any potential winter weather, that's when we can start talking about specifics, accumulations, timing, impacts. Until then, enjoy the warm weather while it lasts. If you're in an area expecting beneficial rain, thank God for the moisture. If you're in the Northeast dealing with lake-effect snow, stay safe and patient. This too shall pass. One final thought. Next week, I'll be breaking down the January 13th through 16th timeframe in much more detail. We'll look at storm potential, temperature trends, and what it all means for your specific region. You won't want to miss that update. The pattern we're tracking has the potential to impact everything from your daily commute to your heating bills to whether your kids get a snow day. Remember, weather is never boring. It's always teaching us something if we're willing to watch and learn. May God bless you and keep you safe, whatever weather comes your way.